Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Again, I'm Earl Roberts. I'll be with you for the next few minutes as we continue in our discussion of workplace violence. We'll specifically talk about the 4 categories of workplace violence, or the 4 types of workplace violence. Before we do that, let's think back. Earlier this morning, we talked about the definition of workplace violence. And if you remember, this is any act or threat of violence, any harassment, intimidation, etc., that occurs at the workplace or is directly related to the workplace and creates a climate of fear and distrust in the workplace. So that being said, I mentioned that there are 4 types of workplace violence. If you look at those case studies that we reviewed earlier, they will all generally fit into one of these categories of workplace violence. Type 1 is criminal intent. Type 2 is customer violence. Type 3 is coworker violence. And type 4 is personal relationships. In type 1, criminal intent, the aggressor has no direct connection to the organization. The aggressor is there to commit a criminal act. Most common example would be theft or armed robbery. A deadly weapon is usually used in this category of workplace violence. There are some employees that would find themselves at a higher risk of this type, and that would be any employee who works directly with cash, any employee who works the night or overnight shift, or any employee who works alone. The second category or second type is customer violence. Now, this is violence directed at an employee by a customer, a client, a patient, a student, an inmate, really anyone that your organization provides a service to. In this category, we see that the violence usually occurs during the normal day-to-day transactions between the employee and the customers. The third type or third category is coworker violence. Now, this is when the aggressor is a current or previous employee of the organization, and they return to do violence at the job site. Now, some may say that a supervisor or a manager is at a higher risk in this category, but I believe a more accurate statement is a supervisor or manager may be at a higher risk of being targeted. In this category of workplace violence, the aggressor may have a target for the violence, but they are going to use and take any target of opportunity that they find as they go toward their intended target. Also, a coworker could be the target in this violence, or all coworkers could be, especially if the aggressor feels that the organization as a whole has wronged them. They may look at everybody as their target. And in the fourth type of workplace violence is personal relationships. Now, this is usually a domestic violence that spills over into the workplace. But here the aggressor has some type of personal relationship with an employee, husband, wife, friend, someone they just met the day before. But the aggressor shows up to the work site with the intent to do violence to that person and anyone that they feel stands between them and that person. So these are our 4 types or 4 categories of workplace violence. And we're going to use these with everything else that we talked about. And this is going to lay the groundwork for us to go forward into the risk factors and the warning signs of workplace violence. All of that will help us to go forward into ways of preventing or reducing violence in the workplace.